welcome everyone.
Welcome everyone. Neale Donald Walsch is our guest today, and I'm going to read you a bio that his office sent me as if you don't know who he already is. And if you have no idea who he is, then you shouldn't be even watching this interview.
Although the bio is quite impressive and very good, actually. So whoever wrote it, kudos off to them. And we are very honored to have you here today, actually. I've known of your work for 25 years. And Anthony more recently, right? But changed your life.
Yes, for a few years now.
So anyway, I'll do a shorter bio since everyone clearly knows who Neale Donald Walsch is, and that is W-A-L-S-C-H. That's a private joke because I'd gotten it wrong in an email briefly. And I want to make sure we don't we don't ever get that wrong again. So for those of you who are new to his work, which would be very few, I imagine, he has written 39 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. Had an early interest in religion and a deep connection to spirituality. So Neale spent the majority of his early adult years thriving professionally, yet searching for greater meaning in life, like so many people who are likely watching right now. So this yearning led to a series of deeply personal spiritual encounters, which he experienced as direct exchanges with the divine. And of course, those of you know this series of books called Conversations with God, right, emerged, books 1 through 4, I believe, at least that's what we have. Many other books, right, 39 in total. And the Conversations with God series were translated into 37 languages. 7 books in the series reached the New York Times bestseller list. So that's pretty impressive. And the latest book, The God Solution, which came out in 2020, we love this, right? We haven't read the whole thing yet, but I've read about 3 chapters so far. And this is an invitation to humanity to embrace a new global ethic based on a refined and clarified definition of God. And boy, is that not needed. So welcome once again, and we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Renee and Anthony. It's lovely to be here with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. Of course, I'm just joshing when I started off the way I started off. I assume the audience knows that it's my weird and strange sense of humor, but it's nice to have the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you for this chance to tell your audience what's in those books.
One thing that you did add to that interjection in the beginning is something that we've learned on our spiritual path. And that is, if you don't have humor and if you don't have fun with us, it gets pretty tough along the way. So I'm glad that you expressed, the need to not take ourselves so seriously.
I honestly, just to be really straightforward about that, that's profoundly true in my life. If I don't lighten up and just take everything in an easier way, if I start getting real serious about myself, since I wrote a book called Conversations with God, that can get pretty heavy. There are days when that can get pretty heavy. And so I'm with you and I agree with you. And that's why I've fallen back on my sense of humor, because I can't afford. Can you imagine? I wake up every morning asking myself, how would it be if I was like the Pope? God bless him. Or anybody really who's in that kind of a position where billions of people are hanging on your every word. How can you remember if the guy coughs or sneezes? It's in the press, it's in the media. So, I can't imagine what it must be like to be in that kind of a position. I was scanning the internet this morning for a different topic, but I came across a link that said, I wasn't even looking for it, it just came up in a different area of my life, and it said, famous Neale Donald Walsch quotes. So I thought, I wonder what that is. Who put that together? So I clicked on the link. There must be 103 different quotations from my various books. And I thought, who would take the time to do that? And that's when I realized I've got to watch every word I say.
Well, as a former publicist and someone who still dabbles in that, I can concur with you. I've worked with many executives who've had to go on CNN and ABC News, and so often, right, these quotes can be taken out of context.
Yeah, and I had it. You know what's interesting about that, Renee? 30 years ago, long before the books came out, I had a psychic reading. I was having a problem in my personal romantic life, and I just went to see a psychic just for the fun of it to see what she would say. And she didn't say much about my romantic life, but she did when I sat down. This is a true story. I sat down with her. She looked at me straight in the face, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "The day is going to come when people will be hanging on your every word."
Wow.
I know, and I that out of the blue came out of nowhere. I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't, like a lot of psychics." She said, "I can't get more information, but I do know the day is going to come when people will be hanging on your every word." And then she said, "Millions will mourn your death."
Oh.
And I thought, wow, what, where is this coming from? Now, as I look back on it, I see that both of those predictions have come true, or probably will come true.
Well, just remember this, though, in all of your teachings and what we know, there really is no death as we know it, right?
Yes, yeah, that's true.
But I'd like to rewind the clock to the first Conversations with God book and just talk about, for those who may not remember, right, the publicity way back when it first came out, what was the connection process like to bringing that source energy in to creating the book for the first time? And then how has that changed to the more recent work?
Just rewinding. I've got to go back to the beginning. Okay, now turn it on.
That's like a famous singer who, has had, 20 albums out, and it's like, okay, can you play your original?
Yeah.
Hit?
The moment I was desperate, Renee, honestly, everything in my life was falling apart. My relationship with my significant other was dissolving. In the same 10-day period, all this happened. My marriage ended. I lost my job. I was downsized. I said to the boss, what was I doing wrong? And he said, "Honestly, we hate to see you go, but we have to lose some overhead. Last in, first out. You have no seniority." So I lost my job in the same week that I lost my marriage. And then, as luck would have it, within another 3 days, some old gentleman turned into me as I was driving down the road. He's making a left turn in front of me, smashed right into me. 89-year-old man just made a miscalculation. And I wound up with a broken neck in an automobile accident. And it wasn't a hairline fracture. It was a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. I remember the wording exactly because it was a major deal. And that's a fracture in your neck big enough to put a pencil through. So the doctor said to me, the surgeon, when I got out of the treatment, when I got out of surgery, he looked me square in the eye. I'll never forget this moment. The surgeon said, "You understand that when people have a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of their neck, the spinal cord complications and involvements usually kill them, or at least leave them paralyzed. You've had neither outcome. You're a 1 in a million case." Then he looked me square in the face. "What do you intend to do with the rest of your life?"
Wow. The surgeon said that to you?
Yeah, because he realized, yes, he was trying to impress on me that I had been given a gift.
Wow.
To survive that kind of an injury. I did still have to wear my therapeutic collar for the next 18 months. So I was walking around with that collar, and I couldn't get a job anywhere. And so because nobody would hire me, they saw me walking in with the collar, and they said to me, "Mr. Walsh, you do have some good qualifications, but we can't put you on the payroll. Look, you're wearing a therapeutic device around your neck. The one wrong move, and we're paying your hospital bills till the day you die." So they couldn't hire me. Nobody would give me a job. And one guy was at least honest with me and told me why. So I wound up living on the sidewalk. I wound up living on the street. I had nowhere to go because my landlord, had to evict me. I couldn't pay the rent. I had no income. Run out of my savings. And I didn't want to call my family and ask for help because I thought, I'll get through this. It's just a couple of bad months. Actually, it was a year. I was on the sidewalk, I was on the street, living on the sidewalk for a year, sleeping on the ground, and walking from person to person, asking for. My hair was as long as Anthony's, actually longer, and I was asking people anything. You see people with signs, anything helps. Never pass anybody on the street with a sign that says anything helps. For God's sake, if you only have 50 cents in your pocket, give it to him. If he gets 50 cents from everybody that passes him, he can maybe have a hamburger by the end of the day. And I've been there, I'm telling you, I've been there on the street for a year. And every so often somebody would actually hand you a 5 or a 10, an actual $10 bill, and you couldn't believe it. Oh my God. So when I finally did get off the street, I sat down and wrote an angry letter to God at 4:30 one morning. Okay, what does it take to make life work? I give up. Obviously there's something I don't know, the knowing of which would change everything. What is the formula here? Somebody give me the rules. I'll play. I promise I'll play the game. Just tell me the rules. And after you give me the rules, don't change them. And I'm writing this really angry letter to God, just to get it off my chest. And to answer your question directly, because I'm sure she's thinking, will he ever get to my question?
No, this is great, because I actually, I had remembered reading about your divorce and the job, but I don't remember about the neck. And that's really profound. I mean, three things, right? They always
In the same 10-day period.
Yeah.
So God said, let's give him the triple whammy. No relationship, no work, and then we'll send him, into the hospital with a broken neck. How about that?
This is the dark night of the soul, right?
Yeah, to put it mildly. So when I finally at least got off the street and I managed to get a little part-time job where I didn't have to do a lot of moving around, I was back in radio. I got a job in broadcasting where all I had to do is sit there in front of a really nice microphone and just it's 45 degrees outside, 7:14 in the morning. Good morning. There's nothing to do. So that I could do. So I got a job as a weekend fill-in guy at a local radio station. And I managed to earn just enough money to get a small little apartment. And I sat down and I wrote that angry letter to God. And as I'm writing this angry letter on a yellow legal pad, just to get my feelings out, I heard a voice behind me. Do you really want answers to all these questions? And I was like, I turned around, of course, there's nobody there. And I'm like, oh, great. Now on top of everything else, I'm going crazy. But then I wrote on my yellow legal pad, yeah, if you got answers, I'd sure as heck like to know what they are. And I immediately received a thought in my mind, wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? And I said, what's that supposed to mean? And I began a dialogue with a place of inner wisdom within me that did not feel like I was talking to myself. It just didn't feel that way. And as I continued with the dialogue, tears began rolling down my face, because tears of joy, because for the first time in over a year and a half, I felt peaceful and calm. And I thought, wow, what is going on here? But I began receiving answers to the questions that all of us ask at one point or another in our life. What's the purpose of it all? What's the meaning? What's really going on? And the reason I didn't feel the answers were coming from me was that the answers were saying things to me, that I never heard in my life before from any source, not from my childhood training, not from any books I ever read, just stuff out of the blue. Just to give you an example, I was told there's no such thing as the 10 Commandments. I've heard that nowhere. I've read that nowhere in any book I've ever read. I just was like, what is that supposed to mean? God said, no, there are 10 commitments. I made commitments to. Moses went to the mountaintop and he asked same questions you're asking now. What's going on? Give me some answers. And how do I know when I'm on the path? What do I tell my people? They're at the bottom of the mountain and wanting to get some answers. What do I tell my people? And God said, I told Moses to say to his people, you will know you're on the right path when you find yourself not dishonoring your mother and your father. If you're on the path, you shall be honoring your father and your mother. You won't steal. You won't lie. And he calls those the 10 commitments, but not the 10 commandments. He said, so Moses went down and they all heard him as commandments. Thus was born the idea, oh, I see, God commands things, and if you don't obey his commands, he sends you to hell. So, the first domino fell, and we had the domino effect called world religions. I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but there are over 4,200 religions on the face of the earth right now.
That's
not
amazing.
since the beginning of time, being practiced today.
Yeah, that's not surprising because there's so many subgroups that are
Yeah.
part of, right? You've got,
Yeah.
the macro categories, and within it, there's all these categories that we don't even know. I mean, I thought it was great, having lived in Africa myself, that you mentioned in your new book some African spiritual teachers, which, most spiritual books don't even acknowledge or realize they exist, right? They mentioned the main modern ones like Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra, but I loved that you did that. I loved that you brought these names that no one's ever heard of into the picture.
Well, I spent some time in Africa. Of course, I've been all over Africa, from Ouagadougou to Yaoundé and other places in Africa, presenting this information and lecturing and giving workshops and retreats. So, and I was actually placed under house arrest in Ouagadougou, which is a long story for another show. But so I spent some time in Africa because I didn't have the right credentials, and they were very particular about paperwork. And I didn't have the right paperwork. So they put me under house arrest. I totally got it. But because they had a government that was being run by 23-year-olds, and I'm not kidding. The head of the government was like 26.
Which country was this? Because I've driven through Africa.
Yaoundé. It was, it was in Douala, Yaoundé, Ouagadougou, one of those major cities. Upper Volta was the country.
Okay, haven't been there, but certainly
you don't want to go there without your paperwork. I can tell you that.
No, we've dealt with some pretty crazy things at the borders. So,
in any event, the answer to your question, how did I feel when this was happening? I felt filled with joy, with tears of bliss, and also a little bit of fear. I thought, oh my God, what if I'm trafficking with the devil? I mean, really, because the information I was getting, like, there's no such thing as right and wrong. There are no victims and no villains in the world. The information that I was getting was shocking to me. But I kept on writing it down. I never, by the way, never intended to write a book. The intention, I didn't sit down thinking, I know, I'm going to write a book. No, I was just having a private, personal experience.
Would you call it clear audience? Because obviously
no, not really. I was just receiving thoughts in my mind, like listening to your own, when you talk to listening to your own mind, a voiceless voice. But it wasn't my own mind. People have asked me, well, isn't that your own mind playing tricks on you? But except that, as I said earlier, the information I was receiving was so far away from anything I had ever even dreamt that I just kept on writing it down because I wanted to keep track of this. And then at one point in that very first exchange, I was told, you will make of this one day a book. And I remember thinking, and it said it will be accessed by many people. And you know what, Renee, my first thought was, oh, now I gotcha. I remember thinking this because I thought, there's proof. This is the first statement that was made to me that was measurable. It had a measurable outcome. Everything else was conceptual, theoretical in nature. Who could know, it could be, could not be, who would know. But here was a statement of fact. This will one day become a book. I thought, yeah, right. I could just see myself sending my handwritten notes to a publisher. He's going to go, what kind of middle of the night mental meanderings are these? But no. I could just see him running out to the workroom floor, saying to his editors, hold the presses, stop everything. I got a guy here who's talking to God. It's not going to happen. Not in a million years. Nobody's going to publish this stuff. So they did, in fact. I sent it to 5 publishers, and one of them actually put the book out. And it only sold a miserable 15 million copies in 37 languages.
And And by
No.
the way, changed my life. So I just want to mention this because this is so profound that you can't make things like this up. About 20 or so years ago, when I was going through one of my dark nights of the soul, going through a divorce, transitions in job, similar to yourself. And I ended up in Fiji for this oneness retreat, right? Where you couldn't speak anything. You were in silence for 5 days. And anyone who knows me knows that that is a very hard task. So in silence for 5 days. And, on the way, I kid you not, this is a true story. On the way to Fiji, I got up to go to the bathroom. I came back and there was a Bible on my chair in the airplane. Now, I'm sorry, I travel a lot. I run a travel magazine. This has never happened to anyone I know. It's crazy, right? And so I thought, okay, I'll just put it back in the magazine rack. Didn't think anything of it. It's a long flight down to the South Pacific, as you know. And about 4 hours later, similar thing, the Bible was back on my seat. And so I thought I was, kind of losing my mind. That was on my way to Fiji. And then, of course, in Fiji, I had my world shaken upside down because when you're not eating, because, you go through the cleanse as well, and you're going through this whole process, you think you're losing your mind. But then the big crunch came when I flew back to Boston. And guess what was waiting for me? This is actually 20 years old. This somehow came in the mail. No return address, no name. Nothing, right? Except this book. Never had heard of it before. And I couldn't put it down. And I thought, oh my God, this is what happened to me in Fiji, that things were coming through me when I was writing, similar to what you have, right? You just want to write things down. And it turned my life upside down. That was 20 or so years ago. And I don't know how many times I've read it since. And I haven't read all of your 30-something books, but that was a life changer. And the fact that there was no return address, and I still don't even know to this day who sent me that book. But
you what you really can't know and will never know is how long it took me to get your address.
Well, I don't know. You have direct access to source here, so they probably knew the frequency, at least, right, of that Boston house way back when. You've had similar experiences too.
Neale, how has from the very first time when God speaks to you, how has that changed from 20 years ago? How does the information come to you now? Is there any difference?
No, not really. It comes to me in the form of thoughts, awarenesses. God speaks to all of us. By the way, I want to make this point really clearly. In the first conversation, what became book one of the series, I was told, I think it's in the first 10 or 15 pages of the 4,000 pages of dialogue. In the first 10 or 15 pages, it says, I talk to everyone all the time. The question is not to whom am I talking? The question is who's listening? Yeah. And then I asked God, well, okay, if you are communicating with everyone, how does that happen? How does that work? And she said, well, feelings, ideas, pictures, images in your mind that come to you out of nowhere, as well as entire sentences and words like you are receiving. And so in all those different ways, feelings and emotions that arise for you, sometimes out of nowhere, driving down the road, and people say, I don't know, I just got a feeling. Where did that come from? And we act on that feeling, or we act on that vision, or that thought that we had, or sometimes in the middle of the night, epiphany, or whatever it might be. So, but the answer to your question is no, the process has not changed through the years. It's any one of those 4 or 5 different ways. I may be just walking down the street and I'll just go, whoa, and just get an idea out of nowhere. Just the other day, 2 days ago, my wife was talking to me and talking to me about, we need to make some preparations in case there's a wildfire here in Southern Oregon. And then she said, but I don't want to, take up a lot of mental energy making preparations because I don't want to make that happen. I don't want to, use my thought to make that happen.
Right.
Because
You don't throw it into the universe.
Thought creates reality, And I looked at her and I said, wait a minute. Preparation does not equal creation. It came out of nowhere. It just popped out of nowhere. And I said, wait a minute. That's a whole article I could write. And I was just thinking that needs to get out there in the world. Preparation does not equal creation. If you prepare for the glasses not falling off the shelf because you make sure they're not too close to the edge, it doesn't mean they're creating all the glasses falling on the floor. Preparation does not equal creation. If preparation and creation were synonymous, then you couldn't prepare for anything. You couldn't even prepare a meal. Couldn't even prepare dinner, much less prepare for possible negative outcomes in your life. So I said, let's not get confused here. Preparation does not equal creation. Now, Anthony, I give you that example as one way. When things pop up, every one of us have had this experience, by the way. I'm not the only person who's said something and then said, whoa, where did that come from? Where did that come from? And when we have those experiences, write them down. Don't just let it go in and out of your life, because those are what I would call conversations with God.
Including dreams, right? The thing.
Oh, absolutely, including dreams. Hello. Everybody, I should keep a dream journal.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, some of the dreams, Anthony remembers all of his dreams.
And one of them is sitting right next to him.
Aw.
Well said.
Right, you're going to get the credit for that.
Yes.
So do you want to speak to the biggest takeaway before we dive into your latest book, the evolution of a species? Because I'm kind of curious about that related to, I don't even know if you ever really call yourself a channeler.
No, because channeling is popularly understood to mean that some other entity has taken over your body and is now speaking through you. So I've been real careful to say to anyone, no, wait a minute. I'm not channeling God. This is not what's happening. I would call it, then they say, well, then what would you call it? I said, well, I would call it inspired writing. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we're not channeling.
Yeah.
And by the way, contrary to popular belief, half of the writers of the Bible were not alive. I mean, were alive after Jesus died. They were not alive.
400 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important to understand, but they were not channeling. They were inspired writers. So, which caused me to ask God another question, the obvious question. What is the process by which inspiration comes? Where did Mozart get his inspiration? Where did Michelangelo get his inspiration? Where did Martin Luther King Jr. get his inspiration? Where does anybody, from whence cometh inspiration? There's another book. From whence cometh inspiration? So
a lot of ideas are coming out here today.
Yeah. So I didn't channel anything, but I did feel that I was inspired by what I was receiving in my conversations with God.
Yeah, I think about the conversation I had once with Herbie Hancock, and it was so profound for me. And he said, because we go through these processes where we get these downloads and visions and things kind of take over. And, and from that perspective, of course, the word channeling has gotten a bad rap in some circles, or it's confusing, or it's, certainly controversial. But Herbie had said, well, yeah, we all have access to the universe. We all, in a way, he was kind of saying, well, if you want to call it channeling, whatever you want to call it, but essentially his verbiage was, we all have access to the universe.
Boy, is he ever right about it? He's profoundly right, of course.
Yeah. He said, what do you think happens when I go out on stage? Right. And so, all of these film producers and, authors like yourself, I mean, that's what's happening, right? Whether you call it channeling or whether you call it inspiration from the all that is.
Yeah.
It's coming.
I'm just careful. I'm just careful with the word channeling, only because so many people think of it as your body has been taken over by another entity. I don't want anyone to think that my body has been taken over by, by God. I don't want to. We're not going there.
Yeah, I understand.
But, yeah. How else can I serve you?
Well, let's talk about that book, The Evolution of the Species. And, because there are, some people who have so-called channeled books that talk about this evolution of the species. And I know that's one of your older books, but can you just talk to us a little bit about some of the biggest aha moments and takeaways from that book? Because it's such a great name.
What's the title of the book you're talking about?
Evolution of a Species.
I never wrote a book called The Evolution of the Species.
I'm sorry, Awaken the Species, right? Book 4.
Oh, the subtitle, the book is called Conversations, just so the audience doesn't get nuts.
Yeah.
The book is called, friends, Conversations with God, book 4, subtitle, Awaken the Species. Okay, well, because I thought, my God, have I written a book called Evolution of the Species? I don't even know it.
Well, in the book, I think, because I was rereading pieces of it.
Sure, it's all about the evolutionary process. No question about that. Yeah. The biggest takeaway, that number one, that evolution is our reason for being in the physical body. Number two, that evolution, as we understand the word, actually cannot take place in the common understanding of evolution in the realm of the metaphysical, in the realm of the physical. That is, souls, if you please, return repeatedly. We call them reincarnations. Souls return repeatedly to the realm of the physical, not just here, but elsewhere in the cosmos. Because it's in the realm of the physical, and only in the realm of the physical, where we can experience, not just know. It's one thing to know that I'm creative or abundant or joyful or happy or patient or understanding, but what if I want to experience that? In order to experience it, I would have to place myself in the context where such experiences would be possible. And that was the biggest takeaway for me. Oh, now I understand. Here's the biggest takeaway for me: the law of opposites. That in order for anything to be experienceable, its opposite must be known by me. I can't experience up unless I know about down. I can't experience left unless I know about right. I can't experience here unless I know about there. I can't experience before unless I know about after. I can't experience male unless I know about female. Male and female, he created he them. I understand perfectly now that we live in a contrasting contextual field. And that
that's our linear minds, at least, trying to process it all, right? And the whole idea of the ancient sages who would say, you can't understand light unless you understand dark.
Exactly. And therefore, and this was the big takeaway for me, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but in fact, be grateful for the darkness. Be a light unto the darkness that you might know who you really are. But don't curse the darkness. Don't make it wrong, because in the absence of the darkness, you can't experience yourself as the light. So, and furthermore, what you resist persists.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Right, a quote right out of Conversations with God. Neale, what you resist persists. Now, the big takeaway for me from that particular book was that there are highly evolved beings that are present here on Earth and elsewhere in the cosmos. First of all, I was made to understand that when we reincarnate, we can reincarnate just not here on Earth, but anywhere in the universe that we choose. So we have all lived elsewhere. I'm told we have all lived elsewhere. We've had incarnations, if you please. We've had lifetimes elsewhere in the cosmos. And I found that kind of way out. I thought, oh, we're getting way out here. And God said, not really. There's not a one of you who has not looked up at the night sky on a clear, cloudless night and had tears come to your eyes, feeling homesick. I've been there. I've been there. And it would really be nice to go home, back there again. So, and I have had that feeling. So in any event, that even as we have traveled elsewhere in incarnations to other places in the cosmos, so have other entities come here. What entities that we would loosely call highly evolved beings, abbreviated in the dialogue as HEBs, H-E-B-S, highly evolved beings. And I'm told that there are HEBs on the Earth right now, highly evolved beings who are living, walking around. They don't look any different from any of us. They deliberately allow themselves to reincarnate in our form so that they wouldn't be scary just walking down the street. looking like somebody out of Star Trek or something. But that in fact, they might even have become part of the process by which certain information comes to us. Wouldn't be surprised if Gene Roddenberry, just as an example, could have been one of them, because some of the concepts he came up with for the Star Trek, body of work could very well have been advanced ideas. So I
Maybe
know,
all three of us here are examples of them. We don't know.
it's an interesting idea, and I don't want to start getting so far out that your audience says, "Oh, wow, this Neale is really way out." But I don't doubt that there have been at least a few highly evolved beings walking the planet on this earth, and there are some that are with us even in this lifetime, who are knowing things and understanding things. But there is such a thing, as Roddenberry pointed out, as the prime directive. I do believe that there is a universal law that says you do not directly interfere with the evolutionary process of any species. But can you leave little clues around? Can you offer ideas? Can you present thoughts that might not have been presented, even in the form of the lyrics of the next song you hear, or the plot line of the next movie you watch, or the next TV series that you happen to be caught up with. So I do believe that, or the next book that claims to be a conversation with God. Who knows?
So you speak of reincarnation of the soul coming back to this earth realm, this physicalness of what we are. And I guess my question to you is, why does a soul decide to reincarnate at all? What is its purpose?
Have you ever had a sexual experience with anyone?
Occasionally.
Few.
Have you ever had a sexual experience with the same person more than once?
Yes.
Why? Why, if you've had it once, why would you have another? Why would you want another one?
So
That's a great response.
is the
Great
answer
example.
simply to re-experience it in a different way, perhaps?
And maybe not even in a different way, but it could be in a different way. But even if it were in the exact same way, the joy and the bliss and the wonder is something that we want to experience over and over again. And so, of course, we would reincarnate, because the joy and the experience and the bliss and the wonder of expressing our true identity, to say nothing of expanding that expression and understanding more and more about it through the process of that expansion. That's undeniably the driver of our reincarnation impulse.
So as a reincarnation as a human being, if we are source of God, do we have infinite amount of abilities to reincarnate simultaneously throughout the universe itself?
That's a very good question. And I think that in book 3, I believe that question was answered. I was told that our soul, the essential essence of who we are, can exist simultaneously in parallel realities. Which is, in fact, one kind of a way out. You got to understand, Anthony, that some of the answers I got in conversations with God were so way out, even to me after a few books, really, that I thought this is really stretching. But I was told that sometimes it's you talking to you. I actually started writing a book. I'm serious. This is not a joke. I started writing a book called You. No, I really did. The book is called You-You. I never finished it because I thought it's too far out. But the basis of the book was the message I received in conversations with God, that a future you, or a you that exists in a parallel reality, could be instructing or talking to your so-called present you.
I believe that. I absolutely
talking to ourselves. So I wrote a book called You about a guy. It's a science fiction book. It was going to be a novel about a guy who walks into a restaurant that he hasn't visited in 30 years and sees himself in the corner, sees a younger version of himself. And he's like, what am I, in some kind of a time warp? What is this? But he sits down and he realizes that it's his younger self. And they have this fascinating conversation where he tells his younger self, and then he has to think, the older guy has to think, should I warn him about not making certain moves and mistakes?
Or allow him to go through the process.
Yeah, or would warning him stop him from learning what I have learned by going through those? It's such a fascinating concept for a book. And I passed it by a few editors and said that could be a hell of a novel. But I didn't put it out, Anthony, really, because I didn't want people to think, oh, that means the entire Conversation with God body of work was nothing more than a series of novels. This guy's a novel writer. And I didn't want them to think that was what the CWG books were about, because they weren't. But what's interesting?
But I think it's both. I mean, I think when we have access, it's a combination of source, it's a combination of our higher self, and I think it's a combination of everything in that, all that is from the universe. It's all of it.
You could be very right about that. But when my first publisher received the first manuscript, they wanted to put it out as a novel. They really thought that they're going to call it fiction.
Yeah, I understand.
They wanted to do two things. They wanted to change the title. They didn't like the title because they said it's going to be a pushback. No one will buy it. People will be pushed back by the title, and they wanted to make it a novel. I said, no, we're not changing the title. We're not making it a novel. If you don't want to publish it by its regular title as a nonfiction book, don't publish it.
So these are all nonfiction then?
Of course they are.
Yeah.
I have not written a book of fiction in my life. No, they're all nonfiction.
Interesting. So I see the dilemma. I mean, as a former publicist, right, where perception becomes reality and they can't make the leap. Yeah. That's a shame.
So I thought I'm not going to write a fiction book and cause people to think, that's what the other ones were as well, because they weren't. They were honest to God recordings in the moment. I kept a written record in the moment. Those books that you just held up are words that were given to me in that moment, and I captured them as I was receiving them. I didn't sit down and write a novel.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And, from that vantage point, really, Star Wars and all of these, I really think, we're caught up in this Outlander series right now, where the woman goes back 200 years in time. And it feels very real to me. It feels plausible. I mean, call me crazy that you can go back in time or whatever, but.
Well, Shakespeare said it perfectly. I love Bill. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Absolutely. Right. And in a quantum universe, right, technical or whatever, apparently there's no past, there's no future. There is just now.
That's exactly what Einstein said. Einstein proved it mathematically. There is only now.
Yeah.
The single moment. And that huge single moment can be mentally divided or broken down into individual perceptions that you're going to call time and space. The so-called space-time continuum.
Yeah,
but the space-time continuum is simply one. And Einstein proved mathematically that you can cause a rocket to travel up into space far enough, fast enough that it can return to Earth before it took off. And he proved that mathematically.
Yeah, he did. And he wasn't the only one to do that, right? David Bohm and a whole bunch of
since him, but I think he was the first one.
He was the first one, but there's, a lot of bold quantum physicists who nearly lost their careers, some did, who were bold enough to go forward and really talk about science and spirituality being the same thing, just using different language to get there.
I call them idea heroes. You may remember from the book the God solution.
Yeah.
It
It's
talks
actually,
about idea. What the world needs now are idea heroes. That is, people who will put before the world thoughts and ideas that they know ahead of time the largest number of people are going to find unbelievable or might even dramatically disagree with. But they put the idea out there anyway. Galileo, of course, was one of those idea heroes. He dared to suggest that the earth actually revolved around the sun, when the church at that time was teaching that the sun revolved around the earth. And that was the official teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, that the earth was the center of the universe, that humans were the center of God's creation, and therefore the sun revolved around the earth. So they said that Galileo was a heretic, a blasphemer, and they put him into house arrest, put him under house arrest for the rest of his life.
and there's so many examples since then,
Of idea heroes who say, I know this sounds unbelievable, but this is what I know to be true.
Well, what I loved about what you said, and I'm only a few chapters into your latest book, but what I loved about what you said about idea heroes, it's not just the people who come up with the apparently, wacky ideas, right? Or the perceived wacky ideas, but those who have the guts and the courage and the strength and the love and the resilience and the resolve to take those ideas and say, you know what, this makes sense to me, and I'm going to implement that, and changes in my life as a result of it. I think that was really profound. I mean, it's not just the people who come up with them, but it's the ones who to take these ideas and say, you know what, I'm going to go to my community, right? And I think that, again, I'm not far into your book, but you talk about the God solution as being this pure love essence, right? And imagine if each of those idea heroes could go into their own communities and spread the idea that God is pure love, and all the implications that means.
Yes, because when I've said to audiences, I've been told that God can be redefined. What the world really desperately needs now is a redefinition of divinity. And so they say, okay, what's your new definition? I said, a two-word definition, pure love. God is pure love. Somebody in the back of the audience will inevitably stand up and say, oh, Neale, I've been listening to you for 25 minutes in the lecture to hear that you think that God is love. Everybody knows that. Even the world's religions might disagree on the fine print, but they all agree that God is love. And I have to say to the guy in the back of the room, hey, relax. I didn't say God is love. That's not what I said. I said God is pure love. Now the guy in the back of the room, okay, what's the difference? The difference is that pure love requests, demands, needs, requires, and asks for nothing in return.
Like the love we have for a baby or an animal.
Now that is theologically revolutionary. Not a single one of the world's 4,000 religions teach of a God who wants nothing in return. The whole basis of religion is God will do this, you do that. It's a tit for tat arrangement. It's a quid pro quo. You do this, I'll do that. That's the whole basis of the world's religions.
And
so this is theologically revolutionary. It upsets all the theological apple carts. Wait a minute, God doesn't need anything? God doesn't require anything from me? What, you mean I could even be an atheist, not even believe in God? Even atheists are welcome home.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
What would you say to this, that we are all a part of God's pure love?
I'd say you're right. We simply haven't allowed ourselves to believe it or to act that way because nobody else does. So, we're caught in an environment in which we would be the only one. And there have been a few who've done it, even though they've been the only one. And those who have done it, even though they've been the only one in their whole environment that do it, they've been called saints and gurus and maybe even saviors.
Yeah.
And then after we call them saints and saviors, we string them up in one way or another, verbally or physically, and we kill them.
Mhm.
And then we honor them again after having killed them in this never-ending cycle. But there are those even on Earth, and I don't mean people from other planets, I mean actual regular human beings who've gotten to that place of saying, you know what, even though no one else is practicing pure love, I'm going to practice it. And there's a couple sitting in front of me named Anthony and Renee. You need to figure out, do you love each other in a way where you expect, request, require, hope for even nothing in return? That when the other person doesn't provide you with what you imagined, expected, or hoped that they would, that even that's okay, and that you would not withdraw your love in any way, because your love is not based on what they're giving you, but it's a blissful expression of what you are giving them, whether you get anything or nothing in return.
It's unconditional. You're talking about unconditional
It's
love.
not a quid pro quo.
Right.
It's not a trade deal. It's not like, like nations have trade deals with each other. And then, I have that same kind of a relationship with my beloved spouse, with my lovely M. And then on Valentine's Day, I find the perfect card to give her. My darling, my dearest, my sweetheart, I trade you very much. I trade you, and I will never stop trading you. I will trade you until the end of time. But if you don't give me what I'm trading you for, our relationship is over. No, Em and I don't have a trade deal. We love each other without condition. I need to get nothing from you. Read that Nothing. I love you because of just who you are, because of who I see across the room, not from what I can get from you. If I love you for what I can get from you, then I'm not loving you at all. I'm simply loving me through you.
Yeah. I mean, pure love is really being acknowledged and seen for your own divinity, because we are God, right? We are source. We are the all, and that allows us really, I mean, I thought that was beautifully said, Neale, because it allows us to plug into the love grid and not the fear grid, right? And that's really where we want to be. Pure love grid.
I wanted to ask you also, now that we as a species, as human beings, are able to experience pure love of source, of God, and not be burned to the stake for it, and we won't be excommunicated for it, and we will now be listened to more so now than ever before in history. Do you see that we as a species are becoming more open, more loving, more accepting,
Kinder
as human beings than before in history?
I believe that I have no way of knowing about any particular individual, but as a culture, I think that's true. As a civilization overall, I think that's true. The question is not whether we are evolving and expanding in our awareness of who we are and our expression of it. The question is whether we're doing it fast enough.
Yeah.
Whether we are willing to move quickly enough with that behavior, with that new way of relating to each other, quickly enough to stop what appears to be the inexorable destruction of our current way of life.
Yeah, that's well said, right? Because you just look at it, right? Politics, the environment, it's all around us, right? The polarities that we exist. But I do feel like we are moving more towards embracing the idea of oneness or interconnectedness, whatever we want to call it.
What's interesting, Renee, is that even as you say that, the feeling of alienation, one group from another group, is more palpable now on the planet than at any time in my lifetime. I've never seen the level of alienation, nation from nation, nationality from nationality, social group from social group, religion from religion.
I
you know,
wonder though, I wonder,
conservatives and liberals, gays and straights, you name it. If there's a group that's different from another group, they're making the other group wrong. I
but
mean,
see,
many
I
members.
just wonder before a big storm or before extreme change, right? There's always a hanging on to the old. And so I wonder, right, if this is not that period that where we're.
Yeah, I wrote a
Yeah.
book about that. Did you read the book? I wrote a book called The Storm Before the Calm.
Oh, did not read that, but
It
that's,
addresses exactly what you're saying. Specifically, it's called The Storm Before the Calm, which I thought was an interesting twist on words. The play on the calm before the storm. This is the storm before the calm, and it talks directly to what you just said.
yeah.
First of all the cards have to be thrown in the air before they can come down, in the right suits. So I think that you're right. I think that's what's happening right now on the earth. We are seeing the upheaval, the great upheaval, and the question is if enough of us really see that and use it as a tool with which to recreate ourselves anew in the next grandest version of the greatest vision ever we held about who we are.
Yeah, so well said. So I know we're coming to an end of our time, but before we wrap, just because I thought this was just so beautiful, I just
And we
want
can have more conversations like this. I can be on your podcast every week if you want.
Great. We love your work. So we would love an opportunity to continue that dialogue. So I do want to read this because, again, I didn't get this far. This, came from an excerpt that I pulled from chapter 10 of the new book. And I just wanted to read a line and then get your comment, and then we can close because I thought this was just beautiful. So this is chapter 10. Feeling is the language of the soul, which is God individualized. Emotion is the language of the mind, which is thought physicalized. The two are entirely different vibrations, unless they're not. Unless you meld them into one, meld your emotion with God's feeling in your process of spiritual development. I was
Meld, and when I say that in front of an audience, I always emphasize certain words. Meld your emotion with God's feeling.
Yeah.
Now we have divinity expressed through humanity.
I just got chills reading that. Like my whole body just got like, wow, right? And just an inner knowing, kind of an alignment with the truth, if there is a truth.
Yeah, a new way of looking at how our responses in life could be developed. And so when anything comes through my life that I'm not really excited about, if it's an unwelcome event or occurrence, just a moment that's unpleasant or whatever it might be, I always ask myself, how would God respond to this? What would God's feeling be? How would God feel about this? Would God understand it? Would God forgive it? Would God have compassion? Would God be aware of it? Would God feel injured by it at some level?
Interesting. Injured.
And I realized, wow, why am I allowing myself to feel injured by this? I just made that all up.
Yeah.
I just made that all up. Can I use a bad word here? It's called mind fucking.
Yeah. They're perceptions.
Why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? I just made that all up. I don't have to be hurt by that.
Yeah.
So understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master.
Yeah. Obviously, we don't have time to go into this, and it's not your world so much as some of the science that's starting to prove this, right? The conditioning that's almost like a replay of a record over and over and over again. And so to unwire that and simply go to pure love and forgiveness, that's kind of the way through, right? We're going to be doing a whole series with some psychologists.
We don't even need forgiveness. Forgiveness is the biggest obstacle to spiritual growth. Write that on your bathroom mirror. Forgiveness is the biggest obstacle to spiritual growth. Because if I think I have to forgive somebody, then number one, I have forgotten who they are. Number two, I have forgotten who I am. Because if I am truly an expression of divinity, nothing that someone else can do can hurt or injure, damage, or anger or frustrate me. Therefore, forgiveness is not, all I have to do is understand What could cause them to say or do that? That's why it's been written. Understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master.
Interesting. Yeah.
Pope John Paul II was shot 6 times by a guy in a motorcade a few years ago. He's no longer with us for other reasons, but he did survive that assassination attempt. He went directly to the jail cell of the man who shot him 6 times. And he said something interesting to that man who shot him. And by the way, all 6 bullets landed in his body. And he survived miraculously. He went to the jail cell and he just said to the guy something very interesting. He said, "In nomine Patri et Filii Spiritus Sancti, Amen." In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, I bless. He blessed the man who tried to kill him.
Is that not a form of forgiveness in a way?
No, it's a form of understanding. Totally replaces forgiveness. When you understand so, and he said to the man, "Can you simply tell? Would you be willing to share with me why you would do that? I'm not condoning it. I'm not accepting it. I don't want you or anybody else to ever repeat that such an act, but I would like to understand." And the man told him why he did it. He felt that the Catholic Church has done more to ruin his life, et cetera, than any other institution. So he was going to kill the Pope as a way of getting back. The Pope again repeated, "I don't agree with it. I don't accept it as an acceptable means of behavior. But I do understand, given where you are, how you could have done such a thing." And then he blessed the man. Understanding is not the same as forgiveness. It's totally different. But
what about the famous Jesus quote, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they have done," as he was on the cross.
Yeah, it would not be the first statement in the Conversations with God body of work that's not exactly what Jesus taught.
No, I know. We know how many times it's been re-edited, right?
So I'm not sure, but I also do it. By the way, forgiveness, I was told in the material, forgiveness is not a totally useless tool. It's wonderful for beginning students. Mm-hmm. It's a first step.
It feels like in a way
But understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. Then we no longer need to forgive, because if I have to forgive you, I have forgotten who I am, and I've completely forgotten who you are.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like
that. But to quote the words of Jesus, who I happen to adore in terms of all the things he taught us, it was he who said, "Bless your enemies.
Yeah.
Pray for those who persecute you. And do good to those who would do you evil. And if a man asks you for your coat, give him your shirt as well."
That's the pure love formula.
And if a man asks you to walk 1 mile with him, go with him too.
Wow, what a beautiful note to end on. Oh,
quite simple.
Man, yeah. That's just beautiful, actually. So profound and yet so simple, right? We just need to remember, as you said, right?
To remember, that is to become a member once again of the body of God.
God, I love that. Wow. Beautiful words.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. God, what a pleasure it has been to spend this amazing time with you today. Wow. And I hope that everyone who is listening now, first of all, go buy the book, the latest book.
It's called The God Solution.
The God Solution. And on the subsequent pages, we'll put links to all of your work. So people can just do an easy click, buy the book, and also find out about everything else that you're involved in, from workshops and speaking and everything else. And wow, any parting words for our listeners and viewers?
Yes. Your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it.
Pure love.
You You always get in trouble when you think, oh, your life is about you. I see. But I ask God, what is it I don't understand?
Mhm.
The understanding of which would change everything. And she said, Neale, it's so simple. Your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Service and contribution, right? It's the biggest form of, the way that we give back, right? And not having to do it, giving back because we feel the need to, but out of that pure love that you speak to, right? And then from that place, it's effortless.
So, folks, I'll be here again 6 more times between now and the end of the year. So, I'll be a regular guest on this podcast. And then at the end of the year, they'll turn the entire podcast over to me and they can be my guests.
We would love that. So I'm going to come up with another series, right? Another episode with a different name that we can talk about some different content. So we'll definitely do that. Excited about that. Thank you for everyone who's listening. And thank you so much, Neale. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, my friend. Lovely to be here with you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.